This is going to be a closer game than that. They played close games against Oklahoma and West Virginia, lost both of those. Iowa State stumbled the last 2 weeks against West Virginia and Oklahoma State. Look for the Bears to keep that one pretty close. And it wouldn't surprise me if I snuck up and won it. South Alabama at Georgia Southern. They are 5-point favorites on the road. I'm going to look for them to cover the spread. Georgia Southern is winless. South Alabama right now is sitting with a losing record, but they've actually beaten Troy and Arkansas State, which are two of the better teams there in the Sun Belt. So kind of a confusing bunch to figure out there, but I still think they win the game and cover the spread in Allen E. Paulson Stadium in Statesboro, Georgia. Yep, there's a little useless information for you. UMass on the road at BYU. They are 4-point favorites. At home are the Cougars. This is got a strange environment for UMass, a long trip to make into a strange environment with the altitude in the Rocky Mountains and all that there in Utah. It's just not an easy place to play a football game if you're not used to it. UMass, definitely not used to it. Both of them have played Mississippi State on the road this year. UMass fared out a little bit better than BYU did. They actually took that game into the fourth quarter. They're 4-point underdogs. I'm still going to look for BYU to cover the spread here. They're coming off a decent win on the road at UNLV. Neither one of these football teams is very good. Let's just get real. But BYU, I think, will handle business there. Probably win that game by a touchdown or so. Arizona State on the road at Oregon State. They're 7-point favorites. This is another lock, stock, and two smoking barrels pick. Take Arizona State and the points. They have beaten Washington and Utah. Oregon State, their best win is a moral victory versus a Bryce Loveless Stanford team that they lost by a point back about 6 weeks ago. They played a really close game. And their only win of the year was Portland State or somebody like that. They're not good. They're not going to keep this game that close. Arizona State's going to blow them out. Louisiana Tech on the road at UTEP. UTEP's just a bad football team all the way around. They're winless and been blown out in most of those. Looking at the common opponents in the conference, Louisiana Tech's just fared a lot better than UTEP has, obviously. I'm going to take them to cover the spread here, although they haven't beaten most of the teams they've won games against they haven't won by 17 points. They've been closer games than that, but they'll think they'll take care of the Miners in the Sun Bowl. Kentucky on the road at Georgia. It's a big game for Kentucky. They're coming in 7-3, not quite top 25 consideration. There's a bunch of teams with like 7-3 records there, kind of bunched up together, and some of them haven't, really won games against a whole lot of formidable competition. That's why they're not ranked. Georgia's covered the last 4 spreads against UK and have beaten them every year since 2010. They have a common opponent, one of which is Mississippi State Bulldogs, and that one, Kentucky, went on the road against Mississippi State in a game where they thought would be a big showdown and got blown out, 45-7. Conversely, Georgia played them a couple of weeks prior to that and beat them 31-3 at home. That's what I'm looking at. I think Kentucky is okay against mediocre competition, but when they're facing good teams, they just can't get it done. When they've got a team with a pulse, they're not going to be able to get it done. Take Georgia in the points here. They're going to cover that by more than 21. They're a hungry football team. They're kind of pissed off probably about the way they played last week, and I would be too. That was a poor showing. Illinois on the road at Ohio State. It's a 41-point line. Ohio State last week beat Michigan State by 45. You think Michigan State's better than Illinois? Yeah, I do too. They put up a lot of points. I mean, a ton of points against these overmatched teams. Maryland, Rutgers are two that come to mind so far this year. They're looking to make their mark. They're making a statement. They could win the Big Ten championship game in a couple of weeks, and they could conceivably make it still into that college football playoff if the ball bounces their way. It's Ohio State, and that committee is liable to put them in there. I'm going to take them in the points here. Look for them to win that game, like somewhere in the neighborhood of 48-3, something like last week. Navy at Notre Dame. The Notre Damers, rough time for them last week. Big time loss on the road at Miami on prime time. This is a new week, though. I'm sure they've gotten refocused. They're not going to make the college football playoff, I don't believe, by any way, shape, or form. But they've renewed focus here, I'm sure. Notre Dame had been covering the spread until the last two games, been playing very good and blowing teams out. Navy's just not that. They're okay this year, but they're not what they have been in some of the years past. They've had too many close games against inferior teams. This team's not as experienced as some of the ones they've had in the past. I'm going to look for Notre Dame to cover the spread and beat them easily. They'll win by game by more than 17 points. Georgia Tech is on the road at Duke, 5.5-point favorites. Duke, they really fell off the mark this year. They started out undefeated. They've lost their last 6 in a row. They have lost 6 in a row. They're going to make it 7 in a row on Saturday. Unfortunately, Duke's just been blown out by all the decent teams they played this year, which were Miami and Virginia Tech, pretty much. That's the teams with the pulse that they play. They can't do it. They just cannot win against them. This is going to be classic chew the clock up. Duke's not going to score much, and I think Georgia Tech winning, somewhere in the neighborhood of 24-10, 31-10, boring game, something like that. Kansas State on the road at Oklahoma State. They're 20-point underdogs. This is another one that you'd have to be dumber than a box of hammers, in my opinion, to take Oklahoma State in this game. Kansas State has played close games this year. Texas, Oklahoma, West Virginia. All those games were losses, but they've been close. They've kept Vanderbilt. That was a joke. They did lose that one, though. They kept them close. 20-point underdogs. I do not see it. On the road at Oklahoma State, they'll lose, but it will not be by 20 points. It'll be maybe 13 points or so. Or could be a touchdown or less. Who knows? These teams, they're crazy. Oklahoma on the road at Kansas. They are a 37-point favorite. Kansas has been shut out totally by two teams in the Big 12 this year, Iowa State and TCU. Oklahoma is making a push to get towards that number one ranking, and it could possibly happen if somebody loses, somebody stumbles up. Baker Mayfield is probably going to be your Heisman Trophy winner, barring just a terrible game against West Virginia or in that Big 12 championship game. Look for Kansas to cover the spread here. Oklahoma to cover the spread here. They'll win that game somewhere in the neighborhood of 50-0. Purdue on the road at Iowa. They are 7.5-point favorites at home. Purdue's been a bit disappointing this year. Had a decent start to the season. Had that close game against Louisville, who turned out to be, a lot worse than we thought they would be down the stretch. But had a win on a big time. They shredded Missouri on the road, and thought they were going to be some kind of a formidable team. Not really. They have an outside shot at the bowl if they can win this one in their rivalry game next week against Indiana. I don't think it's going to happen. Iowa's a tough team. They're 6-4 and really tough. Play well at home. I don't see the Boilermakers being able to cover that spread. Take Iowa in the points there. Syracuse on the road at Louisville. Louisville is a 13-point favorite at home. They resurged a little bit last week against UVA. They covered the spread there, won that game in pretty impressive fashion and pretty easily. So I'm going to pick them here to take and cover the spread against Syracuse, who's lost their last 3 games after that big upset against Clemson. Nebraska on the road at Penn State. Penn State's 26.5-point favorites. Nebraska lost by 33 last week to Minnesota. If that tells you anything, Penn State's making a push here for a New Year's Six Bowl. They're not going to make the college football playoff now, but I do not see them keeping this game close. I think Penn State's going to blow them out. Saquon Barkley, too, making another push towards that Heisman Trophy. And it's kind of a long shot now after those bad losses, but you never know. Maryland on the road at Michigan State, 16-point favorites. Michigan State is. Look for them to cover the spread here. Maryland's lost 5 of their last six games. They're kind of reeling. Michigan State needs to come out and make a statement after that bad showing last week, and I think they'll do that. UAB on the road at Florida. I didn't write this one in. I'm going to take, actually, kind of surprising to some people, the Gators to cover the spread there. UAB's got a 7-3 record right now. Florida's played some close games at home against Texas A&M and LSU were both 1-point games. They played better in the second half against South Carolina against my Gamecocks last week. They have not won a game since September 30th, believe it or not, and I think they will do so this weekend in Gainesville. They'll cover the spread there, win by a couple of touchdowns. Army at North Texas, they're 2.5-point underdogs. Army's got a strong defense. North Texas has got a very strong offense. When you have two teams that are matched up decently, physically the same, usually the one with the better defense wins, and I think that's what's going to happen here. Army had an impressive win last week at home against Duke. I mean, Duke is not anything great, but they are a Power 5 team, and Army took care of them at home. Look for them to take care of North Texas on the road and improve to 9-2 on the season. Arizona at Oregon, they're 1-point underdogs in Eugene, Oregon, against the Ducks. I'm going to look for Arizona, to cover the spread here and win this game. They were on a roll until they lost to USC a couple of weeks ago. Oregon's kind of been in and out this year. They're 5-5 right now, and don't have a lot of confidence in them. LSU on the road at Tennessee. LSU covers the spread here. They got an interim coach starting at UT. It's Brady Hoke. Sometimes they get things going, but this team's in shambles. They're not going to win that game. They're not going to cover the spread. Boston College plays UConn in Fenway Park. I'm going to take the Eagles here to cover the spread in this one. UConn's actually covered the spread in their last 2 games, but against teams that were not as strong as what I think Boston College is going to be. I think they'll take care of business there at home of the Red Sox. Texas A&M on the road to Ole Miss. I don't know really why Ole Miss is a favorite in this game. I think Texas A&M will cover the spread and win there. A&M's losses were the number 2 and 4, respectively, teams in the SEC, Auburn and Mississippi State at home. Ole Miss is only impressive wins, or only SEC wins against Arkansas and Vandy. 2 bad teams, and they're kind of inconsistent too. I look for A&M to cover the spread there. NC State, Wake Forest. I'm going to take the Demon Deacs to cover the spread here, win this game. They've been very impressive the past few weeks. They covered the spread at Notre Dame a couple weeks ago. Pretty close loss. Last week it was like 63-44 against Syracuse. Definitely their best team since 2006. John Wolford playing good football. Missouri at Vanderbilt, 8.5-point favorites. Take the Missouri Tigers to cover the spread here. They're probably the most improved offensive team over the past 4 weeks that I've seen. They blew out a couple of teams in the SEC the past 2 weeks. UCLA at USC. They are 16-point favorites at home. I'm going to take USC to cover the spread here. The road game, the home team's won 4 of the last 6 in this series, and they're just better than UCLA. Cal at Stanford. Take the Golden Bears to cover the spread here. Stanford's coming off an upset last week over Washington. Cal has upset Washington State this year already. They've proven they can do something, so I'll take them here in the points. Marshall on the road at San Antonio. I'm going to look for Marshall to cover the spread. They're 1-point favorites on the road at UT San Antonio. I don't really understand why. Maybe the Alamo Dome is intimidating or something. I'm sure it would be if it's full of fans. It says that game's available on Facebook. And that's the only place, I guess, Facebook Live. If you go to the Marshall fan page, you can watch that live. I don't understand. One of them says Twitter on one of these games. It's this one. FIU at Florida Atlantic. I guess that's a rivalry. Florida Atlantic's 14-point favorites. Let's take Florida International to cover the spread here. They have some common games against teams in the league there that are pretty close to the same. And San Jose State at Colorado State, 33-point spread. Take Colorado State to cover. San Jose State's awful. I'll see y'all later.